You love Angular. Way better than reactive. Oh, two.
Actually, I've done some things in Angular. I've also done some things in React.
And how about Vue?
I've not done a lot in Vue.
Somebody said industry will eventually go to Vue.
That's what everyone's saying because I think it's even more lightweight than React.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Truth be told, at Smartsheet, we actually chose React because we could do as little or as much of it as we wanted.
But if you are a heavy developer, they like it Angular because Angular is component-based design, front end.
Right. Well, you know, React's component-based, but with Angular, you have to buy the whole thing, right? You have to be in the whole system. And with React, it's more of you can just choose to have just the components, and then you can add things to it if you want to.
So don't worry, you are saying that Angular is the best, that it's not hurting anybody. I don't know this guy.
Yeah, I think it's everybody's got a tool, and it's basically just
a tool.
Tool's a tool. And so this one's more a talk about how it works, not necessarily go out and use it kind of thing. Yeah. So I'm not sure Google would really like appreciate it. I mean, except for the fact that I'm educating, but I'm not like saying, you know, everybody should download it today. Kind of thing. Do a lot of you guys do Angular already? No?
No, we are studying Angular and React and Vue.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the kind of the student generally they want to learn the new technology.
Yeah.
Also, a question before we started. So, since you use React.js and AngularJS, both of them, do you think the React.js has a performance benefit because of what was sold? Because I never compared it.
Yeah.
React performance benefit.
I haven't measured the performance between the two.
From the data, it seems like
I would, in my mind, how the two work, how the fact that you have to have a lot going on with Angular for it to work and not as much going on with React, I would think React was more performant.
Release waiver.
Oh, yes. What is that saying?
It says that you're not liable.
You're not, like if I trip and fall on something?
I think, yeah.
Okay. That's fine.
I know.
As long as you guys throw stuff at you guys throw stuff at me, then this whole thing's off. All right. Voluntarily harmless.
Yeah, we are.
It's okay. The university is harmless. That's good. That's good. You don't have sports teams then, I guess.
We don't have one. Unfortunately.
It's okay. My alma mater sports teams are pretty harmless too.
What sports were you?
I went to Utah State University.
Okay.
And actually, I say that, and this year, our football team's actually really good. We're like 14th in the country and like decent, right? Like we're a good football team. And in the past, we produced guys. There's a guy on the Seahawks, Bobby Wagner.
Yeah.
Utah State Aggie. So, but other than that, our football team is terrible. Basketball team used to be really good. Now it's terrible. Can't have both, I guess. Yeah.
So in a year, how often do you go to talks?
This was my first year of actually kind of doing talks full on, like as much as I could. I did almost 10 talks this year. The interesting thing about speaking is if you have an idea and you submit it and it sounds good, they'll take it. They don't usually look at like who you are or like I'm case in point, right? Like this is my first year speaking. My name isn't really known anywhere.
Not really.
Right? I mean, like not really. And so like I've gotten a chance to speak I spoke in Sweden this year, in Germany.
Wow.
Yeah, right? Like the conferences, the ones in Europe pay for your travel.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, so it's just like, how could you not, right? Take a free trip and then get to talk about something cool. Atlanta is we've been there a lot this year. Huntsville, Alabama.
Wow,
Huntsville, Alabama was the biggest surprise out of all the cities I went to this year. Huntsville, Alabama was actually really nice. It was also, Well, they told me also that it was like the 1 week in the year where it wasn't too hot or too cold. 'Cause I guess normally it's really, really hot. But yeah, the Space Center is there with like Saturn V rocket. That was really cool. Yeah. So basically what I'm saying though is if you have a desire to speak, which I think everybody should do it because it's like, it helps you learn stuff and also you learn how to communicate.
Yeah.
But it's like, all it takes is submitting an application. Or like, they just say, put in a talk title and a description and someone might take it. Cascadia JS is this weekend.
Yeah. I have a friend who did this. He was doing some invited talks too, and fortunately he messed up one of his talks, and right now his confidence level like dropped so bad.
I could see that. Like, yeah, I haven't had any huge ones. I had a funny story happen last time. In fact, it was the last time I gave this talk. I don't know if I should tell it to you before or after, because it'll influence you. No, I got to the end of the talk and this guy raises his hand and he says, "Do you have any blue face paint?" And I was like, no, I don't. Why? He says, "Because you kind of look like Mel Gibson in Braveheart." So you guys seen Braveheart?
Yeah, I know that.
And then I go, "Oh, well, I guess I'll take that as a compliment." And he goes, "Well, not like a perfect match, but you make weird facial expressions like he does."
What was that?
I was like, I don't think that's a compliment anymore. Everybody laughed.
I'm googling that. Mel Gibson, Braveheart.
Yeah, it's our time.
Right?
Long time ago.
Freedom or something. Yeah. Nah, no. Kinda.
He's
I don't see
younger
it.
a bit, that's why.
I was gonna say that's what I asked because I mean I say that joke at work and people kind of look at me like, huh? Because yeah, Braveheart was a while ago.
Released in the 90s, right?
Yeah. I think I was in high school. Yeah. So yeah, that's probably the most memorable.
Okay, I'm more curious. Like, how was your first talk?
My very first talk. So my very first talk was at a Smartsheet. I should say my very first conference talk because like I ran user groups back when I worked at Utah State University as a student and was a developer for their IT department after it. And so I ran actually a user group there right after.
Utah State University.
Yes.
Oh,
Are you familiar?
Yeah, I visited what is that? Brigham Young University.
Okay, yeah. BYU is just down the street. We're about 90 miles south of us. All of my in-laws went there and they loved that school. Yeah. But at Utah State, while I was at Utah State, I saw that there was a Cold Fusion user group. I did Cold Fusion development at Utah State.
Cold Fusion?
Yeah, Cold Fusion, CFML.
Yeah, Cold Fusion. Okay. They have their own language at that time.
Oh yeah. It was this thing that a company called, I forgot what their name. Oh no. Macromedia bought it. You guys remember Macromedia? Macromedia did Flash.
Oh my God.
Macromedia had Flash before Adobe did. And then Adobe bought Macromedia. So Cold Fusion is now an Adobe product. It was a lot more prevalent back in the early 2000s.
Once upon a time, that was very popular.
It was really popular because it was one of the first web-based languages that connected a database so easily. Yeah. You could just connect to a database with like a single tag and that was it, rather than writing all these lines of like connecting and using database drivers and all this stuff. And it was so awesome. I found out there was a user group in Salt Lake. Salt Lake's about an hour and a half south. And so me and my coworker drove down there and it was so great. We actually saw other Cold Fusion developers and like, that was my first introduction to community, like having a developer community around you. And then we realized there was a big community, there was a decent sized community up in Logan where we were at. And so I started a group up there and we had a good, actually about this big, a group maybe this big, maybe 10, 12 people sometimes. Because we had a group on campus that did Cold Fusion and there were a couple of companies in town that did it. So at that group, I ran meetings and I gave talks about different projects I worked on. So I don't know if that's the beginning of my speaking, but my first talk at an event was Smartsheet hosted Google I/O Extended a couple of years ago. And it was in downtown Bellevue. And Google I/O lets various satellite sites have, that use the Google branding and you can broadcast the keynote and everything. And then you kind of run your own talks after that. So we had a guy from Google and a couple people from Smartsheet. And I gave a talk and I rehearsed that thing so much and had a bunch of help from people inside the company who were big public speakers. And I got up on that stage and it was, I felt like I really nailed it. It was really just a great experience. And ever since then, I was like, I want to do more speaking. And so after that, my talk was about building add-ons for Google Docs and Google Forms. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
Yeah.
Google has their own thing called Google Apps Script.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I built the two that Smartsheet has. I built the one for Google Docs and the one for Google Forms. And then, so I talked about our experience about that. And fast forward a year and a half later or so, almost 2 years later, we hired a director of developer relations, Ted Dillard. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Ted Dillard. He's a Seattle-based speaker. And he said he's building out a team that would have people go around and give talks and talk about various technical topics. We might tie in Smartsheet, we might not. But the point is to get Smartsheet's name out in the community, all over the development community, right? And so that's honestly what I'm doing today. Is this is my day job, and I really like it. It's been a lot of fun. And so my first conference talk actually was this talk. Now that I'm thinking about it, I gave it at a talk at a conference in New Orleans. The conference organizer, we were talking to him about a month before the conference, and he was like, actually, I have an opening. Someone just backed out. Do you guys want to do a talk? And I was like, my boss was like, hey, Scott, you want to do a talk down in New Orleans? I was like, sure. I was like, what do you want me to talk about? And the guy's like, do you have any good Angular talks? It's like, let me see if I can come up with a couple ideas. So I submitted 2 ideas to the guy. And one of them was talking about how Angular components work together. Because in my experience with doing Angular and React and any of the frameworks, we kind of get it. You go through the tutorial or you jump onto a project that's already there and you kind of get it, sort of. But you don't really get it. It's like there's this secret voodoo that's going on that you're like, okay, I can understand how to fix something or get something to change, but how do I start my own thing? What pieces, how do they line up? So for me, this was actually a talk for me. I mean, I kind of wanted to figure out how everything lined up and get it solidified in my head. And so it was actually this talk. So that's an interesting question. So, yeah.
It's nice that you know about the struggle about, we can change this specific part. But, how about if we make it from a ground up? It's like, how do we do that?
Right. And so my experience with Angular, actually, my production code that's out right now is AngularJS, which is totally different than Angular today. AngularJS, Angular version 1.
A lot of people love.
Right, and they still have it. The funny thing is,
Yeah, I know.
I still, today I had to deal with the application that I wrote with AngularJS. It's still living sort of some life support.
Isolated.
Right, well, the funny thing, I read,
It's 1.8.
it's totally isolated. Yeah, it doesn't, any of the changes are not the same. And we didn't do it with any of the right paradigms. So we have these massive controllers that do everything, and that's not what you want to do.
Are they still updating?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
We're gonna start it all.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Let's jump in?
Yeah.
All right. So that actually is a decent segue. So, I mean, AngularJS, I don't believe is still supported. I know that Angular 2, I will refer to it as Angular 2, but I think today it's Angular 6. And so, but it's written in TypeScript, you use TypeScript to write it, not JS. And so that's kind of why they have the distinguishing changes. So as I mentioned before, and this whole thing's been recorded already, so I don't really need to go into my introduction of what we're going to be talking about today. But that is, my goal here is to help us understand that when we look at an Angular application, and to be honest, a lot of the same principles I talk about in this, you can apply to React applications or other component-based applications. The architecture and how things are arranged, really, really similar. There's some syntactic differences in the components, but other than that, my React apps and my Angular apps, actually the file placement and stuff is really, really the same, or very similar, not the exact same. So today's topics, what I want to do is I'm going to talk about some of the different terms that we see when we deal with Angular specifically. And what we want to talk about are components, which is what the whole thing breaks down to. We have components that are in our applications that are basically the building blocks of our Angular apps. Our components, we're going to talk about how the views interact with our components. And then modules, are essentially the next container out. Again, we'll talk about those. And then how services kind of tie everything together. And then finally, as we have our single page application, because that's what Angular is really built for, it's to have a single page application that changes state. So the router is what we use inside of our Angular application to change the state, to change the address in the address bar, to pull up the right code, even though it's not pulling up a new page per se, it's pulling up the right code in our application. So components are essentially classes. In fact, they're really similar to JavaScript classes. In fact, they are JavaScript classes. The only difference is they have the decorator, the component decorator on top of that component that we'll talk about that today and kind of talk about what goes in that, but that's how it distinguishes the difference between having a regular JavaScript class and a component inside our Angular application. So our components have a one-to-one relationship with a view. So every view, every time that you have a representation of something on your screen, it should have a single component working with it. And then the thing with components is you want them to be as dumb as possible. It's actually good for your components to be dumb because who has like experience with object-oriented programming a little bit? When you write your classes, you want your classes to be dumb, right? You want your classes to be by themselves to be able to operate as much as they can to encapsulate that logic so that you can plug it into other things. You can use them and reuse them over and over again. Components are the same way. You want to be able to use and reuse your applications or your components. The component decorator, it identifies the class as a component, but then also sets up various imports and also gives us our location of our various pieces that we want in our component. We associate it with a template, and then we describe how it's going to be referenced in the HTML. And then finally, we'll list all the required services that we'll be using with that component. The thing that's different, one of the things that's different between Angular and AngularJS, AngularJS, the cool thing about it when we got it, when we first saw it, we had this demonstration where we could take something on the page, we change it, and it would change something else on the page. And it's like, oh, these two things are bound together, and we can like do this thing, and it's like magic. The problem is that magic got really cumbersome, and as you started building more complex applications, the performance went way down. And so it was kind of a two-way binding that you had between your objects. So now, inside of Angular 2+, there's a single or a unidirectional data flow. Every time you make an action, it changes the state, which changes the view, and then you can change, and then those offer up new actions. It seems like it's two-way binding, but it's not, because you actually bind one way and then you bind another way, but it's two different bindings that operate independent of each other. They do what?
I thought this is React.js.
Yeah. Oh, I think this is more of the standard that what's going forward.
I like it.
So yeah, and I think that's kind of the modern way that the modern frameworks are doing it, because they want to be more efficient. Yeah. A component is tied to a view, as I mentioned before. The view is just the HTML that's representing whatever logic is happening inside the component. That's essentially what all the components are saying here. Is we want to create a piece of the view for our page. It's not normally an entire HTML page, because you want to be able to componentize your UI as you're building your application. So that's what our views are. As I mentioned before, modules are the wrapper where you wrap related components inside of. In our demonstration today, we're only going to use a single module, because you start out, every application has an application module inside of Angular. But then as you build out new components or new pieces, shouldn't use the word components because they actually have a meaning. So if I have my main application, but I wanted to have an authentication piece, like a login page or something, you would create your own module for that. And then as you create these new functionalities to your application, they would have new modules inside your application, but they would be connected to that main central app module. So the difference between Angular modules and JavaScript modules is, the key here is this decorator. each time we talk about a different piece inside of Angular, Angular uses these decorators, these ng decorators, for specifying what our class is and what it is, how it's going to relate to our Angular application and the rest of the pieces inside the Angular application. Both of these things, so a JavaScript module does all these things, and then you put the Angular module information on top of that. So a JavaScript module, you can have a module in JavaScript where it tells you where to go. So it abstracts our code out. It keeps our code in a container, but also encapsulates what we're doing. As I mentioned, we keep our functionality based on the different modules that we have, manages dependencies, allows it to be reusable, and it's all in a single file. Our modules we have our class, and then we export it. We have the export statement in our JavaScript modules that allows us to use it so that we can use the different things inside of our modules. ng modules are the same thing. However, they have with the decorator that we have for Angular, that gives us some more metadata for the Angular framework to use in our Angular application. But we do the same things of importing other modules. We also specify what we can export as well.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So before I was messing around with Python, and I think they also have decorators. Is it like the same concept? Because in that sense that we use it for like authentication.
Right. So and Java also uses decorators. I think C#. I'm not as familiar with C#. Any C#? No. Okay. Java also has decorators, but yeah, same type of thing where you add some functionality that you tag it on top of a function, and you add that functionality to that function and allow it to do some processing. So yeah, for authentication, you kind of do that processing first and then let the rest happen. I'm assuming that's how that happens in Python.
Yeah,
that is how it happens in Java.
It is.
Cool. Yeah. So, yeah, same concept. The fun thing is as you learn this stuff, a lot of the concepts, the good concepts, all kind of bubble up to the top, right? Like the concept of a component-based framework is kind of just becoming a standard in JavaScript because Angular, React, I think Vue, I don't know Vue. You guys look at Vue a little bit? Is it not component-based? Okay, but Angular and React, they're both kind of the front runners as far as frameworks that people are using in JavaScript. Both component-based, because we're realizing that the reusability is important. And finally, services. A service is a class that kind of ties everything together. Our components are dumb, but the services are the ones that are in the know. Everybody talks to the service, and the service kind of divvies out whatever information that you need. A lot of times, I think of services as a data access layer. Are you familiar with that? With like a DAO in your server-side programming, if you're talking to your database? The service layer, a service inside of Angular is that layer that talks to the API, or talks to the server, essentially. As we'll see a little bit in our demonstration. But it's independent of the components, but all the components will talk to it. It's kind of the common piece that everybody talks to. Routers. They are configured to essentially change the state. As I mentioned before, they allow you to interpret the URL that you have in your address bar, and it takes those different values inside of the address string that you put in there and allows you to pick out whatever state it needs to be. The nice thing is you can set them so that you can say, I'm gonna give you in this case, a joke, and I'm gonna give you a joke ID, and you're gonna give me a specific joke back. And so it gives us a specific state. And it also logs that history, so our browsers actually think it's going up and down a navigation tree, and so we can go back and forth. All right, I think we'll talk a little bit about ModelView, There's a lot of conversation on the internet on what type of design pattern Angular is. The most common thing I've read and I've heard people say is that it has model view model principles. It's not fully model view model. However, the concept is pretty close. You have your model, which is like your database or your API that you're dealing with on your server. And then you have your view model, which is changing the state of our view, and it's interacting with that view model. So we have our Angular framework here operating
updating its state, but also doing some processing with the view model that will periodically receive data from a server. So the closest thing that you could tie it into, if you want to tie it to a design pattern, would be this structure. You have a lot of interaction happening here, and then only talking to our model when you need it. So that's kind of the closest if you're going to put it into a design pattern. Really, and the reason why we put things into design patterns is just so that we can identify it. So we can say, oh, that's kind of what this is. So we can talk amongst each other. This is blah. We're basically giving whatever the structure is a name, so that we can say, you know, it can be easier to talk about rather than saying, well, it's that thing that kind of interacts a lot with its, you know, inside the client and then interacts with the server only a little bit, that sort of thing. A ModelViewModel is kind of lets people know that that's kind of what's happening. All right, so let's get into our example. I'm a dad, and that gives me the right to have bad jokes. And so I have a bad joke generator, or a bad joke application that we have today. It's going to have some components where we're going to list our jokes. Then we're going to also see our jokes. We're going to be able to vote on them. We'll look at how a joke service will interact between our components. And then our module in this example will be just a single app module like I mentioned before. So first is our joke list component. Then our joke detail component. As I mentioned before, we have our service that talks to them. But our vote component doesn't need to know about the joke model or jokes or anything like that. It's just a component by itself that is going to be part of our application, but doesn't necessarily need to be tied together with the other two things until we call upon it, which we'll see. All of them fit inside of our app module. So we can keep we're encapsulating everything in this application inside of our single app module. By default, we have our list of jokes that pop up. Notice our URL is defaults to /jokes. And then our model that we have in this situation is we have our single joke class, which has some properties of just an ID, a punchline. It's going to have some lulls and some groans. And then we're going to give it some methods where we change the voting. Our fields are also set when our constructor. And so our app module, I wanted to point out, a module, a JavaScript module, aside from this decorator right here, all of this and this down here is just a regular JavaScript module, or TypeScript module in this case. We have our imports where we're bringing in our different pieces of our application. And then also, obviously, some things that we need to use for application to work. But then we have our decorator here that has our declarations, which are all of our, what they call callable classes, I think is what they call them. Where you have your app component and your different components that we're going to be using. I'm using the browser module, which is required, I believe, in all browser-based applications. Our router, and then our provider is where we put our service. That's how we tie it into this module of our application.
Yep, service.
Yeah, our joke service here. And then finally, Bootstrap is our component that first fires when we first load our application. Our application will be bootstrapped by our app component. So yeah, this all is part of just that decorator. And then finally, to use it, it exports right here. That look pretty good? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, that's Angular support other platforms. Although why they have that browser?
The browser module.
I didn't.
I know that
I know React do that because they also have React Native.
they do have React Native. I don't know if Angular does.
I think they bounce in the future.
Right, they definitely. I mean, I definitely. If you look at the Angular documentation on your phone, they want to install a PWA, and so. But I don't think that's a that's still using Chrome, right? I think progressive web apps are still using Chrome
Also like
to make it look like a mobile app, but it's still a web app.
pretty good.
It's pretty nice. I want to get more into that. Have you done a lot with PWAs?
I feel like that's a concept that's been out for a while now.
PWAs?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just creating a shortcut.
I did
Right.
one
Desktop.
Right.
I did one app.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you add a manifest to your web app and it essentially allows you to.
So it's not just that you also have to support offline usage.
That's right.
And cache your app.
Yeah.
We can talk about that.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Starting into something that I want to learn about. So anyway, yeah. So the top and the bottom are essentially the same things that we have in our JavaScript modules, but the decorator is that key that keeps us with our Angular application, as I pointed out before. And here, I have set my routes here inside of the app module. I did that because of the demonstration and it's easier to see. In your applications, if you start getting bigger and more complex, you would probably abstract this out into its own class. But for our situation, since we're only using 3 paths, I left them inside of the app module just to kind of show what they do. But I mean, the routes are, they just have a path, a component, and then they map those paths to whatever component we need to fall to. And by default, we're going to be showing this, the jokes list, which is what we saw on that first page. And I already kind of talked about this. So we already talked about how our joke class has our fields and our methods that do pretty simple things where we're just upvoting our either lulls or our groans. And here's our service. The thing I want to point out about the service that is key, I believe I highlight it here. Actually, I don't highlight it here. This is where we have our database, again, hard-coded for our demonstration purposes. In your situations, you're probably hitting an API or calling a database to get this information. But we have our joke objects, which give it an ID. We have the setup. We have the punchline, which is very obviously off the screen because that would totally give away the ending. And why would I show you the punchlines right now? But don't worry, you will get to see them soon. So we have our database that's hard-coded here. But what makes services awesome, I might not highlight it at this point, but I want to now, is this decorator for the injectable. It allows you to inject the service into your other components inside your application. Angular, one of the key things about Angular, why people want to use it is this dependency injection that it has. It allows you to only have to instantiate the service once, but then it's injected into those components whenever you need it. So it makes things a little more performant.
So you like it? You like this kind of? I don't really like it. Like in other, component, I want to use it. So like my just got it from nowhere.
Right.
And sometimes if I open that file the first time, I even don't know I have this here. I have to check other files.
Well, for here, this makes it that it's possible to inject, and we'll see in our other components that you'll actually see it. You still get it. You're still passing it in to each of the components.
Not in the component you want to use it, right?
No, you do. You pass it into the constructor.
Oh, okay.
But you're right. Like when you're looking at the constructor, you're like, okay, where does that come from?
Yeah.
Right. So it's training yourself to find the injectables. Yeah. And to be honest, it's usually back here in your app module. You'll come back to your app module and say, okay, what's going on? Because this is telling you what's going on. It's your master, right? It's like, okay, everything. Exactly. That's where your modules are. They kind of they're your starting point.
It's like a C++
I remember this kind of concept. Really like many years ago, I used this framework for Java. It have a huge list of and you have to read it.
Totally, the big config files. Right. Yeah, I definitely heard those stories about the old days of Spring. But yeah, Spring also has dependency injection. Yeah. Right, and so maybe that's that's.
At that time, I liked that. Kind of like new at that time.
This is new. This is cool. And then oh wait, no, I don't like it so much. So, talk about our jokes. Okay, so we have our our service has our database, but then has these methods that we can use. These are the methods that our components will use to get the data from our whatever service that is provided, our data source. We can get our listed jokes, and we get our single joke, our logic to do that to get it out of our database. That's when I highlight injectable. So our joke list, pretty straightforward. List our jokes. This is our component. This is the whole view for this component that we have in our app. Our component looks something like this, where we have our component decorator. Each of our decorators for our components is going to have a selector, which that's the tag that you'll see in your HTML to see how you want to list it. You'll see an app joke list tag. The template URL you have here tells you which file inside your application, where that'll be. You can put the HTML in line right here. Most people don't, because unless it's really, really small. I mean, this is pretty small. But you want to keep things readable. I would highly recommend doing it this way. And then finally, your style URLs. You can have multiples, actually. You have an array of your CSS files there. But if we have here, this is our list, our joke list.component.html. You'll notice this dot notation that they have. This is kind of the word I'm losing, like a standard, the convention. This is the convention that you use inside of Angular. All of your components will have a dot component dot something.
Not necessary.
It's not necessary, but it's kind of what people expect as you go forward. So it's just one of those things that doesn't have to happen, but it makes things a little more readable, because then you understand that joke list component, all of my joke list component files are all going to be together. You'll see them all grouped together in your list of stuff. And then you have your HTML or CSS or TS files. But here we have our HTML. Some of the things you want to look out for in AngularJS, there was a little bit of different syntax here. This is looping. You have this star ng and then the capital camel case verb that's happening for our loop. So our for loop, where we're looping over our jokes, and then each of our jokes, it provides either a call function on this click event. So the events are wrapped inside parentheses. Again, something new, at least with Angular, as opposed to Angular 1. And then here, this double handlebar notation is actually taken from Angular 1. They had that before. So that's kind of nice. I guess that's nice if you were used to that. So, but here is where you get your joke service. It's injected into your constructor of your component. Can't use it until you put it into that constructor for our component. And also the router comes in. If you need to use it, you have to put that in too. Once we have our service, we can use the methods inside of the service. So in this situation, we have this implements on a init, which means whenever this fires, this thing's just going to launch, it's going to run. When it runs this ng on init function that says, I'm going to grab the jokes without you asking me to. It's just going to happen. Yeah.
Implement is a keyword of standard JavaScript.
Which one?
Implement.
Oh, implements?
No.
This is TypeScript. Yeah, this is, so yeah, because TypeScript now you can, because it has types, it has interfaces, so you can implement the interfaces. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, if you're coming from a strongly typed background, TypeScript's kind of fun. I kind of like it a lot, actually. I like TypeScript. I don't get to use it as often as I want to.
I have to, it's a little common problem for me, but I didn't find too many problems called the tag. I mean, I made a lot of mistakes when I read the code, but it's not called the tag.
Yeah.
Really, I got problems with the tag.
The types are nice because, for me, I feel a little more secure with them. But that's me.
It is.
Right? You know what to expect. You know what you're going to see coming in.
You
and how
can
to handle it.
realize
So with our router, how we interact with our router, it'll have functions based or off of that object. We're going to navigate whenever whenever we click on show joke, it's going to change the state to tell us to go to the jokes route that we have. The jokes concatenated with the joke ID, which we set back here in our app module. Right there. So we're setting it to this path that we have in our app module, which will correspond with that component. Yeah. So now once we click on a joke, our URL changes, gives us an ID. Now we have one of our bad jokes. It has our component. It has our punchline. We have our voting happening. What this shows actually is this shows a combination of a parent-child relationship between views. Because as you remember from that the diagram that I had before, where I had the 3 different components, joke detail was its own component, but votes were also their own component. So we're seeing one component here on the outside, but then we're calling 2 different instances or instantiations of vote. It wanted to point out that the route, right? It sets up the URL so that we can come back to this joke anytime we want and set the application in this state. So let's look at our joke detail component, where we have on a init, we're going to load, we're going to grab from our URL. So this is how we grab our query parameters, this long string. Whether I like it or not, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I like that, because I mean, we kind of already knew how to grab query string parameters, but this is how Angular wants you to do it.
So long, yeah.
Right, it's a lot, it's really long. It's nice if you're using VS Code to get, one of the Angular plugins so that you can, have completion on that. Yeah. So that goes into our joke ID, which we use to load to get our joke right there, and that loads for our page there. But the interesting part about this view is we have the view here, which is our joke detail view, but then we want to use our app vote component. Each app vote has a vote count and an on-vote event, but we're passing it in different values so we can keep reusing the vote component however we want. But in this situation, we're using it to upvote, yay, I like it, and in this situation, no, I don't. But you're still upvoting that you don't like it. And then we have our different variables there for our setup and punchline. So that's how we implement a parent-child relationship in our views of our different components. And how I talked about before, let's look at our vote component. This is nice because it shows a binding, 2 of our bindings. So our one-way binding, when we input our votes, it brings in the vote count that we're passing in. Go here. We're passing in whatever this value is set as in our object. But then when we output it, you do what they call it emitting. You're emitting an event. You're sending it out. You're sending it up to the parent. And that's how you bind something out. So this is one way. This is the other way. But together, it looks like it's 2-way, even though Angular has separated it out with their 2 different types of bindings. That's kind of nice. When we perform our OnClick, which happens on our click event, it changes the value of our passed in value and then emits it out as an on-vote event that we have.
which is our event that we defined up here. Oops. All right, so I know after seeing the code, you all really wanted to know the rest of the jokes. So let's come here to our application. I'm hoping the green box, should I bring it down just in case?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bring it down.
Yeah. Do that. And let's pump that up a bit. So we have all of our components working flawlessly together. What we have here is we have our jokes. So first one, why did Darth Vader cross the road? To get to the dark side. I heard a laugh. I heard a groan, heard another laugh though. All right, so we'll tie it there.
You're missing.
Prediction?
Yeah.
Ah, so you have a prediction vote right here? That you have a number of people that have already seen the joke and they're gonna tell you what that is? That, honestly, you could add that as another a vote component into our app right there. Yeah. We come back here. What did the rug say to the floor? I think we already saw this one. Don't move, I've got you covered. I heard a laugh. Heard two laughs. Okay. And what's great is that all these values are being stored inside of each of our joke objects. So if I come back here, our votes are still here. My votes are still there. How do you get a tissue to dance?
Go.
Put a little boogie in it.
Ew.
I don't have an UVA. That's another vote I could put in there. I'll count those as drones.
No, you don't want to do that because then you always gonna get those like sour people that just like hate everything.
Right. That's true.
That's what Facebook got rid of their dislike.
That's right. That's right. They did. Let's see. This one my coworker loves. This is from my coworker Taylor. How much does a polar bear weigh? Enough to break the ice.
Okay.
Taylor likes that one a lot. He opens all his talks with that. He's like, now my talk can't be any worse than this joke. And he goes, I own the world's worst thesaurus. It's not only awful, it's awful.
What?
No English majors in here. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Not only is it awful, it's awful.
Thesaurus helps you come up with new words for the same meaning.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Synonym.
And then finally, Velcro.
Okay.
Such a ripoff.
Where's Velcro?
The one that when you put like let's say you have a backpack or something and you stick it in that.
Do I have any Velcro? I don't have any Velcro on me.
I don't have it too.
Oh.
Like in the hat.
Do you have any Velcro?
There's a Velcro in the hat.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
This one? No, that one is not the Velcro.
Oh yeah. Do you have Velcro?
Yeah.
Yeah. That.
This one?
No,
Yeah.
that's not Velcro.
Oh, no.
It makes like a sound. It's got this kind of a furry side and then not a furry side, and it goes together. And you rip it off to get it to go up. So, all right, I won't put any of those about because that one, yeah. All right, so that's what our application. That was a simple application that we wrote to kind of see how our different components work together. What I wanted to do next was actually take a real world example from our work at Smartsheet. There was a team called our solutions team. I got this from our designer months ago, and he wanted me to point out, he's like, you can use this in your talk, but you must tell and reassure everyone there that this is not a final draft. He's like, this is not even close. So Colton, this guy up in the corner, he's happy. I said, this is not a final draft. He's done, he refined it, it's different, it's better work. But as you look at this screen now, if this is a single page application, and if it was an Angular application that we were designing, you have a designer that gives you this, or a customer that gives you this, and you want to start architecting your idea, where would your components and modules go? Like what would you identify as a component on the screen? Which one?
The top bar could be one component.
The top bar, yeah, that could be a component.
one component.
This just by itself, probably.
Yeah, because maybe you have some type thing, have some functionality.
Like React.
Okay, yeah, you definitely have some functionality inside that would be by itself. With that top bar being a component, I agree, but would it be only one component? Or would it be a parent-child relationship where you have the nav bar, but then you also have,
Oh, I didn't see. Oh, there's a whole thing is the.
right, so you have a hamburger,
That's what it is.
you have a help, right, so we have a help, we have Colton's friendly face up here in the corner. I mean, that in itself. What else? Yeah. I honestly wonder, and this is just me thinking out loud, maybe that's a module? Maybe. Maybe not. So yeah, sidebar, this would be a component. Definitely the table. And then the things inside the table. How would you organize the table? Would you organize it, like how would you organize those the components? Where are your components in there?
It's on the top, which is one component, and each one.
You think so the header should be a single component? Okay.
Rest of them we use one component.
It's like what you said with the joke title and the joke details, right?
Uh-huh.
Something like that.
Okay. So you have I see. So this would be a component, then each one of these would be like a table row component of itself. Okay. And maybe a table cell component inside of each of the table rows, because each one of these is its own column. Yeah. I definitely think, I mean, if you're going to have different tabs between, well, no, because those components would be the same there. But I was thinking maybe the open and the close would be their own different modules. But then now that you're seeing this and looking at it from a component point of view, hopefully after our conversation today, the view of seeing how things are laid out and how you would architect things and separate them and connect them together is a little more clear, slightly. And then we look at this complex applications, because most of our applications they're going to be building are going to have pretty complex UIs. We have pretty involved applications that we build. And so by coming up with a good structure for our components, we can build things that make sense, because as they make sense to read, we spend more time reading code ever than writing code. So our code should always, yes.
That's a maintenance cost.
Right.
That's maintenance cost.
It's readable code is so much more, it makes the cost that is spent on trying to figure out someone's code is so huge in companies. That is why we have these frameworks. That is why we're trying to settle in on these standards so that we can say, okay, I know how this is supposed to go. Because I know in Angular, or I know in React, I'm going to have my components here, and I'm going to have my views here. Something I wanted to show was kind of a pattern that someone talked about recently. They put a name to this pattern. Back in the day, we used to organize our files by functionality, kind of like how when you pack a suitcase and you put all your pants on the bottom, you put all your shirts, and you put all your underwear, then you put all your socks. But then when you're trying to living out of your suitcase, oh, I got to go get my pants. So you're kind of digging in a little bit, you grab the pants off the bottom. It kind of messes up everything up above it. And then I'm going to grab a shirt. Then you do that after a couple of days. Your suitcase is a mess. With our code, back in the day, we used to have all of our DAOs together. We used to have all of our beans together in Java. We used to have all of our, all the things that had the same functionality as far as their purpose was together. But today, think if you tried to pack your suitcase where you packed it in days. So you're going on a 5-day trip, you have 5 outfits, you put your pants, shirt, underwear, socks.
Nice.
Pants, shirt, underwear, socks, right? Day 2, pants, shirts, underwear, socks, day 4. That way when you pull it out, you don't disturb anything else. similar to how these are laid out in your Angular applications and in your React applications. Same type of thing. My joke detail, all of my files for joke detail are grouped together in one spot.
And I think the other benefit to do that is really easy to, it's a public API. It's really easy.
Yeah. Another great benefit of that. So, and then I mentioned this before, one of the standards right now is to say that when this is a component, I'm going to say .component. When I'm dealing with other things, like our service, our modules are going to be .module. My service, .service. That way, when I'm scanning the code, my eyes, they just see it. It's just it's not required, but it's definitely makes it easier to see. These .spec files, anyone knows what those are? Test files. Angular creates those for you, which they're basically saying, hint, hint, test. It's a good thing. Do it from the beginning. It's a really smart idea. So you want to have your tests there. So my goal today was to kind of help organize our thoughts when we look at our UI and look at our components in our web applications. I did want to take a second, although it sounded like most people knew what Smartsheet was, because if not for them, I wouldn't be here. So I just wanted to say that Smartsheet is a work collaboration platform in Bellevue, Washington, a web-based application. From a tech stack perspective, actually, it's all vanilla JS right now. It is moving towards React. We picked React because you can use as little or as much of React as you want. A downside of Angular is that you have to buy into the whole thing and use it for everything. And it was a little too bloated for what we needed. So we use React for our components. We use Java backend for our server-side applications, although we have teams now that are building applications on the sides that are using Node. Definitely hiring developers if you're looking for a job. So we are, as I mentioned, we're based in Bellevue, just across the water. And it's a great place to work. So I just wanted to, I had to throw that plug in just to kind of justify the fact that I left work at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So, my name is Scott McAllister, developer advocate at Smartsheet. You can reach me on Twitter, or you can reach our team, developer relations at Smartsheet. If you go here, you can sign up for, if you go to the register link, you can register for a free Smartsheet account, use a different email address than one you'd already use with Smartsheet, and it allows you to build applications against Smartsheet, but also try to, and it doesn't, those don't expire. Cool.
Can you give more explanation about your company? What kind of service are you selling?
They call it work collaboration platform. I call it, think of all the reasons why you use a spreadsheet that you shouldn't be using a spreadsheet, and we capitalized on those reasons. So a spreadsheet was built so that we could organize our finance and our numbers and things.
But even a lot of people, they are using it.
Right. But today we use tables and spreadsheets to track our tasks and track work and track lists of things. And so Smartsheet, the guys who started Smartsheet said, well, why don't we take that spreadsheet concept and then add features to it, like let's attach things to a row. So you have a row of a let's say a bug in a piece of software. So the row has like a title and a description and a status and things like that. I can attach screenshots to it, to that row. And then I can take that row and I can send it to somebody and say, hey, I don't have to give you access to my entire sheet. I can just give you access to this single row, and will you update the status of this? And then each of the columns inside of your sheet now also are strongly typed. So you can change, you can have just regular text columns, or you can have columns that have symbols, or columns that have dates, stickers, or lost my train of thought. But other drop-down menus. We can have drop-down menus, contact list columns, where it takes all your contacts that are inside the application, and you can pick them. And so that way, I don't know, when something happens, it says, hey, if this date comes, email it to this person, kind of thing, or if this status happens. A sheet I made that I'm most proud of, I made for my mom. We have a big family, and she was tracking everybody's birthdays and in her Franklin planner. And Franklin planners are this big paper thing, and she always has to write it down every year. So I created a sheet for her, put everybody's birth date in it, and then I tell Smartsheet to send my mom an email 2 weeks before everybody's birthday. And then it automatically just sends that stuff out to her. So she knows when to send her birthday card.
Nice.
There's my 60-second pitch on Smartsheet.
Everything is Smartsheet. the product to China. But the server is not so some time ago. But I was running my company in China. My company uses Google Doc.
Okay.
We try something because we have different floors, so pretty awesome. But until one day they quit China, so we cannot use it.
Oh,
I
no.
still think we cannot use it in China right now.
Oh, really?
They need that.
I don't know if it's allowed in China. I know that and I don't know if we have it localized, like, the translation in Chinese.
It's a big market.
Huge market.
And we don't have Google and all that stuff.
It's in MS Dynamics, so I'm sure we can access it.
Yeah.
At least at that time, we don't have that. Yeah. Maybe
Yeah. I know we have someone there's a guy on our engineering team, I believe he's Chinese, because he's very much concerned about how we localize things. And he's always like, hey, so is this only available in English? And we're like, oh yeah, it's only available in English. He's like, we need to get on this. And it's like, he's kind of our driver of getting things translated.
I think there is a lot of demand.
I definitely agree. We're definitely expanding into those types of markets. I mean, like right now we're trying to get so that we can be used with government, because there's a huge market with government, but you have to go through a lot of hoops, right? A huge, like we have our own data centers right now. And so for government, it actually needs to be in a very government approved data center. Or a government approved cloud. So we have to go through all these different verifications of,
Like the NES compliance,
that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, just has to be, they call it FedRAMP, so we can federal government approved. So it's a lot of work.
Could I ask several more questions? Sorry about that.
Yeah, go
One question actually from Jim.
Oh.
He asked, how do you, keep the number, keep that voting number in component?
Mhm.
We refer to pages to become that.
One more time.
We keep that voting number in
Yes.
component, so
Yes.
they can go back to see the number.
It's only in memory,
Okay.
right? As it sits right now, that's only memory. I'm not saving it to a database.
But under any thing like the Redux, keep the
State.
not save, but keep the data.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know that far. So yeah.
Maybe I could use those,
I would guess if there is a Redux, right? Because React has Redux, right? I would assume Angular would have something similar, but I don't know. I wouldn't want to say, yeah, sure, when I don't.
Another question is,
Sure.
if we keep the data, that say that every component, so that you journalists hold a simple data, they cannot drop any component, otherwise they will lose that state. So will that be a problem? Like I have a really huge component.
Mhm.
They have to keep all of them.
So you're saying if you have a big application that has a
Thousands of components, they have to keep them all.
well, at that point, you want to start modularizing things, right? So you want to you want to separate it out into your modules,
Yeah.
so that because if you make as things get bigger, you kind of want to separate it out, like how they're in server side things right now today. Microservices are a huge thing because we have all these monolithic applications. It's a big monolithic application, and so whenever we want to make changes or add things to it, we kind of have to do this weird it kind of won't fit in. And so the microservices idea or modularizing things is what
That's not a big.
we're going that direction. We're not today. No.
It's a lot.
Our core application does not. Yeah, that's it in the class.
So now, originally we used the Angular, now over to the React, my current product.
Our product actually, Smartsheet itself as a product never used Angular. Smartsheet is a product today. What you see if you go to smartsheet.com and pull up the app, that is straight up vanilla JS. That's all, no JavaScript frameworks at all. And so we're going towards React because we're realizing that we should standardize on industry standards that everyone else is using, and so we should have things that people can get ramped up on fast.
How about the use of TypeScript? React usually they are using TypeScript.
We are using TypeScript with React.
No, React also using TypeScript.
Right. Yes.
Because TypeScript originally came from
Microsoft.
Microsoft.
Mhm.
The other one, it's funny because this company went to the stock market April 27, 2018. So we are talking to millionaire now. Hey,
You are.
because you're my student.
Right.
You got the stock option.
Right. That was, going public was a very interesting thing. I'm not a millionaire. I didn't get into that.
Okay, sorry, you are billionaire.
Yeah, our founders did quite well. So,
Okay,
all right.
so this is our Coconut Bank.
Oh, thank you.
So City University, put this one yours, and then we need advertisement.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very nice.
So you strongly recommend the TypeScript?
I like TypeScript a lot. I use JavaScript and TypeScript both. In my current project I'm working on for developer relations, we're doing a Gatsby site. Have you guys anyone heard of Gatsby? Yeah, it's a static site generator. Pretty awesome, actually. It's React based, but it's JavaScript based. But our application, at Smartsheet, everything is TypeScript. Everything going forward is TypeScript.
Because your productivity goes up.
It's what they're finding. Yeah, they're finding that, especially since as you have full stack developers who are used to doing server side languages that are strongly typed, they want strongly typed on the front end too.
I think it's a problem. Most of the time I learned JavaScript. Oh my gosh.
Right. JavaScript definitely has some weirdness.
That's a starting one, 30 and simple. That's a script.
Yeah.
And they say, I think migration is pretty easy to type.
Oh yeah. There's a guy on my team actually that does a talk on that. Like
I think I was there.
Were you there? Yeah. You can start out honestly just by changing the suffix to TS and then going forward for that.
Even though changes don't really have to use anything.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Oh, well, thanks, guys.
I have one more question.
Yeah. Sorry.
So for software development and tracking, I'm ready to get off BSTS or off whatever they call it these days.
Yeah.
And I was looking at like the timesheet planner that you guys have
Uh-huh.
on this one. How would you say they compare?
The timesheet planner for Smartsheet?
Yeah, so for software development and tracking.
Oh, like for bug tracking and stuff? It's good. We use it. We dog food Smartsheet as our bug tracker. So our bug tracker is one big sheet. But I also know we have teams that are using Jira. I was on a team that actually built an application that synced Smartsheet with Jira. So the development teams could use Jira, and then the management teams could see kind of a high-level overview of everything. So, yeah, but from like a bug tracking perspective, especially if you're on a relatively small team and whatnot, I think it's great. So, I mean, I can, if you want me to.
Sure.
This is Smartsheet. Say what? Oh yeah. So this is remember that AngularJS app I was telling you about? I queried it today to see how many people are actually still using it. Apparently people are still using our DocuSign portion of it. The other one's not so much, but DocuSign for sure. But if I was going to use Smartsheet to track bugs, you can come here. There's actually an IT template that you can. Hold on. Our bug tracker. Yeah. So what I like is that we've added. Okay, if they're just going to do that, let me show you a real one that I actually used today. Several team task backlog. The cool thing is by default, Smartsheet has this view of the table, right, where we set up our columns and everything. But for me, when I'm tracking my own tasks, going through this is kind of labor intensive.
Turn it into a Kanban board.
You turn it into a Kanban board. Yeah. We have a card view. So that's super nice. And our mobile team just put this functionality into the mobile app like last week. Love it. Like it's how I track my own things. And so now I can drag my stuff over whenever I'm done. That kind of thing. So just kind of
that kind of stuff. So that's all. I'm pretty sure the card view is still vanilla JS.
That's like Bootstrap.
You have the same. You have a similar.
Oh, last time I presented you guys that's Trello, and then I presented
Oh, yeah.
Kanban.
Yep. Trello just does this.
Yeah.
Is this free? Just wondering.
Is the recording still going? If you go to developers.smartsheet.com/register, you get a sandbox account that we reserve the right to blow away your data at any time. I've worked there for 5 years. We've never done it once. So what I'm saying is you could probably use that. But if you use it inside of a company or something, please buy it.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
yeah.
You get it for free through our school.
Oh, you can?
Microsoft Dynamics.
Oh no. This is Smartsheet. This isn't a Microsoft product.
The Dynamic, you're part of one of the partners in the application.
Really? That would make sense. I don't know what kind of relationship we have.
I was looking at it like very carefully, but I couldn't quite.
That's cool. So you guys can use it as students? That's great. Check it out. I mean, try to log in with your student ID or student email. That's how it's tied. If you create an account through that developer page, do it not with that account because it can only create a new account. Okay. So, no. I actually use this for my own personal to-do list, right?
Yeah.
It's a little heavy to buy this just for a personal to-do list, but the nice thing is you can have our different teammates.
I really like the simple synchronization of the table and card switching.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
You can see like the view and use that for your report.
Yeah, I know. It's like-
You can now use it to report.
Yeah, they did a good job with that part. And then if you're doing a waterfall type project, you can slip the date view. It's like start and end
What's the
dates
name
and
of
stuff.
McAllister?
This one doesn't have any dates set to stuff, so there's no point.
That's
Switch over.
the one that you use.
Trello.
Trello.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Trello is an Atlassian product. They were just purchased by Atlassian just last year.
But a lot of people do using Jira. and
A
stuff.
lot of people use Jira. A lot of people used to use Trello. I mean, Trello's huge.
Should we?
Jira.
Yeah. You haven't used it?
I can.
Right? Like, our thing is we kind of saw what they were doing with Trello, and we're like, oh, that's cool. We'll take that idea and then just kind of make our own version of it. I kind of like our version of it.
And you can create dashboards.
Yeah.
So I can do that. Yes.
So for like developer relations, we have our own
You
dashboard.
can use Trello.
Yes, Trello.
So what this does is this pulls this. We have a bunch of widgets inside of a dashboard. This pulls from our company sheet. So it already says, oh, here are our team members. Here's everybody on our team.
I like the icon of request them.
For support. Right?
you get the person.
We're supportive. Yes. And so yeah, you can have all these different things that are all pulling off of different sheets. So we have some sheets that we're getting the information from, but then this is a dashboard that you can have to kind of say, hey, everybody else in the company, here's the high-level overview of what we're doing and what's coming up.
I like that the company itself is using the product internally.
Right.
It's really nice.
Huge. It's one of those things too, if you're at a company and you're not using the product that you build for the thing that you're doing it for, it's kind of like, if we don't use our own thing, then our own thing is not that good. But, yeah. Cool. All right. Thanks, guys.
I didn't know Smartsheet was local.
Yeah, it's in Bellevue.
I thought it was San Francisco.
Yeah, that's the funny thing, right? I mean,
I
our
could
CEO
tell.
is down in San Francisco all the time because he's got to talk to those people, but like, yeah, we're here.
In my hometown. I live in Bellevue.
Yeah.
That's why I've been going to the talks.
That's right. Ooh, that's right. I'm talking at the next one.
Oh.
We're gonna be talking about currying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I volunteered to do it because it was like I don't know anything about it. So let's see.
Wrong.
Currying. Yeah, I
Came from a person's name, not because it's like curry.
right.
And that's like, I think if I remember curry, it's like you pass like a bunch of arguments,
You can do.
and like it will just, I don't know, like
I don't really like.
I don't like it. It's kind of confusing because
Yeah,
like,
kind of conflict. I think that's too much.
it's like it can keep
Thank you.
calling the function.
Yeah, something with calling functions and functions, something or
Yeah.
other, and a,
Sometimes it's useful, like a reductive connect.
is that what
yeah,
it is?
yeah, yeah. I think I've done that enough.
It's really have to write it.
It was one of those things where I was giving a talk at a ModelViewModel school a while back, and I mentioned like, oh, this framework, it allows you to do currying, and everyone goes, and someone in the
What's
back goes, what's currying? I was like, I don't know, and then no one in the room knew. And so then the guy in the back's like, hey, that sounds like a great idea for a talk. I'm like, I'll do it.
Thank you so much.
No problem, thank you.
See you.